Hey everybody, MSOM 601 coming to you today from Bremerton, Washington. For those of you who may have been in the Navy, maybe you've been here before. They have a big naval station here. I think they have nuclear subs and all that. I'm here at the ferry dock. One of the key modes of transportation in the state of Washington is by ferry. And in order to get to a lot of the different locations here, you have to go by ferry because they don't have bridges. They have a lot of islands. And so today, part of our business, I have a consulting business as well called In Connections. And In Connections works with hospitality properties across the country to maximize their business. I don't do much work in that anymore. My wife does, and she's actually here doing some quality assurance work over here on the island today over in the Olympic Peninsula of Washington. So sometimes I just tag along with her. Sorry for the squinting. I left my sunglasses upstairs in the hotel. I wanted to take a couple of minutes today and talk about the course project outline. I spent time grading those today. And I want to talk particularly about introductions. You'll see a lot of comments in your paper on your outlines about introductions. And I think I talked before about how important introductions are. They really are because it really helps to set the expectation of the paper. But one of the key issues that I find a lot in students writing, they make the introductions way too long and they have way too much information in them. So introductions should first of all be short. They should simply state the purpose of the paper. This is not a place where you put a lot of detail. And so what I always encourage people to do, you can be very overt in this, is say this paper will present something, this paper will blah, 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 and it will present it by what's the method you're going to use in order to present your information, in order to what's the goal of the paper. So if you do it that way and you have it over a series of 2, 3, 4 sentences, then what you're going to tell the reader is you're going to tell the reader what the purpose of the paper is, what method you're going to be using to present your information, and then what the overall goal of the paper is. This isn't a point, for example, in the ominous story. A lot of people were giving an overview of ominous story. Well, that should really be a separate part, a separate section underneath the introduction. A lot of people were talking about thinking styles in the introduction. Well, that's an important part of the paper, so it should actually be included in a separate part outside of the introduction. So just take that for what it's worth and make sure that you take a look at introductions. Again, they are important, but don't make them the centerpiece, if you will, of your overall paper. This past week we talked about defining the problem in Lesson 3. Defining the problem is incredibly important. I think many of you saw the Einstein quote that I put in there and had some good comments on that. The dentist example that was included in the case study, I think, is a good representation of what happens when you move immediately to a solution and you don't take time to define the problem. And for those of you who are in customer-based businesses, which I think most of you are in one form or another, it's going to be really important for you to talk to your customer. And so one of the key things in this exercise, they really didn't talk to the dentist. They talked a lot to other people, and they just got busy about putting a solution together, when in fact if they had probably talked to the dentist at first and not just relied on what they thought the problem was, then they would have probably been much better off and on a much faster track, if you will, to get to the solution. So that's defining the problem. Lesson 4 coming up talks in the discussion board about sweating the small stuff. There's a video in there. Many times you hear people say don't sweat the small stuff, and so what happens in this video is there's a quite funny Brit who talks about some ideas and what happens when you can actually look at the small pieces of things. So I always, in these videos, like to present kind of a contra view sometimes of popular opinion. And so I think drove my parents crazy when I was young, because if someone said something was white, I always tried to prove to them that it was black. Maybe just the a challenge that I have, and I've been blessed to have a daughter who's exactly like me, so for what it's worth. The second part that I want to talk about is facts and opinion. And so in the case study this week, you're going to be presented with facts versus opinion, how to detect bias. Some interesting articles. The Fascion article this week from that book is really, really good. It's one of my favorite pieces in there, and it talks about what I call the D3, the donkey dung detector. So how can you really be critical of the sources that you have, not only in your professional life, but in your personal life, and now in your academic life. Everything that you find on the internet's not true, which is actually why I stress so highly that you find peer-reviewed research at the CSU online library. Please, please, please make sure you do that. As you are putting together your course project, one of the things that people forget sometimes is the requirement that's listed there that you have to have a minimum of 9 peer-reviewed sources. Peer-reviewed sources are those that come from academic journals. You find academic journals at the CSU online library. So don't fight it. Get used to it. If you have any challenges, I have a tutorial under Course Home on how to utilize Access. I give you some examples on this in the on the CSU online library. So make sure that you do that, and make sure that you don't miss that. So in lesson 4, we'll talk about sweating the small stuff. We'll talk about fact versus opinion, the donkey dung detector, or the D3. And then finally, this will be the week that you submit part 1 of your course project. Make sure that you take a look at the outlines, and in particular, make sure that you're very detailed on looking at the course project overview to see what is required in that submission for part 1 or part 2. Do remember, again, this is a cumulative course project, so you'll build part 3 off of what you have in part 2, so at the end it's just one big paper. All right, so let's see. Seahawks will be playing on Sunday. I'm recording this a little later in the week before. And then I leave town on the 3rd. In the meantime, if you have any questions or comments, give me a call. And then from the 3rd to the 4th, I may be out of pocket a little bit in transition between here and Bangkok, Thailand. But send me an email, and I will make sure as soon as I hit the ground in Bangkok that I pull in the emails and get back in touch with you. So have a great week. Go Seahawks, and keep studying.